Oh yeah, it's time for some Mega Man X, and we are going to shoot down some Maverick scum. But first we're going to wait until they take their turn and try to kill us, and then after they're done with their turn, then we're going to try to kill them, and the cycle will continue. We're very polite death machines. So, Mega Man. Mega Man is one of the largest and most long-running video game series ever, comprising several different series, as well as quite a few spin-offs, one of which we're going to talk about today. I'm honestly kind of surprised that he hasn't shown up on my show before, considering the amount of games that he's been in. Over 100 titles of Mega Man games have actually been released, almost all of them making it overseas to America. And the series is well known for recycling the same formula in almost every single game it's had, with small tweaks here and there, such as a different hero, a different design to Mega Man, or a few new powers, but the basic premise remains the same, which has led many people to, well, saying that it's being, yeah, that. Now, while I do identify myself as a fan of Mega Man, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about him. I actually know very little about the long-running storyline behind the games, and I'm not going to pretend that I've played every game in the series, a feat that sadly is getting more and more impossible by the day. Anyway, I would have to say that my favorite series is the Mega Man X series just because it feels like a darker and grittier storyline. It has its quirky moments, and a lot of the Robot Masters are pretty hilarious, but all things told, it is a much more serious story when compared to the original Mega Man games, or these newer Battle Networks, or even the Mega Man Zero titles. That being said, we're not taking a look at one of the main games today. We're taking a look at a spin-off game that I think takes place between 7 and 8, but I really have no idea. And it was Mega Man's first and to date only foray into the RPG market. While putting Mega Man in an RPG may seem like a really bizarre choice, let's keep in mind that gaming franchises often attempt to branch out and experiment with varying degrees of success into other genres that they may or may not be accustomed to. Heck, Mario's first RPG was a great success, and to a slightly lesser extent, so was Sonic Chronicles. So the question remains, does the Mega Man RPG do a good job of introducing the franchise to a new genre? The short answer, no. The long answer, sit down and let me tell you about it. So the plot revolves around X and Zero, along with a new Maverick hunter named Shadow, being sent to a large fortress to investigate some possible Maverick activities. When they get there, they find that not only has a high-ranking Maverick officer named Epsilon been creating some very powerful robots that could cause some problems, but also that their new friend Shadow is a double agent who is going to betray them the moment that they got there.
Shadow? No way!
Oh my god, I can't believe it. A guy named Shadow was actually a double agent. What a surprise. This will revolutionize the way we play RPGs. Oh my god. Naturally, things go to hell pretty quick after this.
Zero!
What you say?
Zero!
That you only meant well, 'cause you did.
While Zero is thrown off the side of a tower, X escapes but is injured. He's found and nursed back to health by a group calling themselves the Resistance, who are actively trying to oppose the Maverick Rebellion. X decides to stick around and help them out since their goals are pretty much the same. And since they're calling themselves the Resistance, I get to do this.
You see the distant flames, they bellow in the night. You fight in all our names for what we know is right. And when you all get shot and cannot carry on, though you die, La Resistance lives on.
Beyond that, the game is basically a Mega Man game that's trying to disguise itself as an RPG. You run through a certain stage, you get to the stage boss, and then you fight him. The only real difference here is that you pick up companions along the way, and you participate in really slow, plotting, turn-based battles, which only really serve to try and pad out the extraordinarily short stages in this game. While I say it's a Mega Man game disguised as an RPG, that's not entirely true. They actually stripped a lot of the iconic things from the Mega Man games out, especially the Mega Man X series. The themed stages that usually reflect a boss and their special powers is no longer present. Instead, it's just random factories and metal corridors. And even worse than that, after you beat a boss, you don't get a unique weapon. Instead, you buy your weapons from the generic shops, and the only difference between them and your ordinary Mega Buster is the amount of attack that you get, and whether or not they give you an element, like fire, water, or thunder. And those are the only three elements in the game. Instead of trying to figure out what kind of unique weapon would be best suited for a situation, instead you're just left with the bare minimum of how to play an RPG. You basically try to weasel out what your enemy is weak against, whether it's fire, water, or thunder, which is usually completely apparent given what they look like, and then you use that to cause the most effective amount of damage. Now, if you're thinking they can make up for that by giving us an epic RPG storyline, you're going to be disappointed there too. When I said this was a Mega Man game, I meant it, and that is a huge detriment when you're trying to make it into an RPG. There is absolutely nothing in this story that couldn't have been told to us through a basic side-scrolling shooting adventure like Mega Man was used to. Even the new characters that we are introduced to throughout the story, which, by the way, have yet to appear in any other Mega Man X game, do very little to lift this game up from what it's trying to be. And unfortunately, that's a huge detriment, once again, in an RPG, where one of the main draws should be character development and legitimate drama. The character development in this game is so lax that none of the characters really even have much personality. Even X, Zero, and Axel, the three main characters of the series, barely do anything to really show that they have any personal attachments to anybody else in this game. It's really, really disturbing, especially when I'm supposed to actually be connecting and caring with these characters. The new characters that are introduced in this game, such as Massimo the Gentle Giant, Cinnamon the Healing Bot, and Marino the Thief, are some of the most one-dimensional characters I have ever seen in any RPG. Any character development that they have is quickly forgotten, and they just stop right after their introductions. That's how much character development they get. As soon as they're introduced and tell you who they are, it stops right after that. The only new character in this entire game that actually gets something close to meaningful development is a former bounty hunter named Spider, but even his development is completely cliched, and you could see it coming a mile away. It's just not that compelling. And his development pretty much stops at the end of his introductory chapter, which is better than most of the characters, I'll admit. At least he got an entire chapter devoted to his development, but once again, it's completely cliche, and after the chapter ends, he's basically just another faceless soldier on your team. It's completely distracting, and it does not adhere and endear me to the characters at any point during this entire story, which is what I was really excited about. There was potential here. Potential to introduce new characters with some actually complex backgrounds compared to other Mega Man games. I suppose you could get away with X, Zero, and Axel as not being very well developed because you could say they've been that way since the beginning of the series. They don't really need development. But with the other characters, there is no excuse for introducing them in this game and then giving us only the bare minimum when it comes to actually explaining things about them. One of the best examples about how poorly this game handles its characters, and also a great example of how poorly paced it is this character right here, Ali. You know him for all of 30 seconds before he is literally ripping his heart out of his chest to give X an important item that he needs to finish the stage that you're in. Then he just shoves X out of the room as security guards pour in that X could have taken out by himself, and then he blows himself up to try and save X's life. And then from then on, they just keep talking about this one-shot character that we barely knew as if he was some sort of saint.
I will not let you pass!
You shall not pass!
And if you fail to see the difference between those two clips, please allow me to lay it out very bluntly for you. Gandalf was actually an important character! And when I said this game was poorly paced, I meant it as well. Every single dialogue scene in this game is so full of blunt exposition that I actually thought I was at risk for blunt force trauma while playing this game. All of the dialogue is for expositional purposes only, and basically consists of go here and do this and kill this guy. And that is about it. We're never really given a good explanation as to why we should care, and why the villains are taking over these particular areas, or why X is really helping out the Resistance beyond, well, the fact that he's just generally a good guy, even though he doesn't really have to and could blow through these guys on his own. But wait, you basement-dwelling troll, I hear you say. Plenty of RPGs have had stupid or ridiculous stories before and carried themselves on their gameplay. Can't this game do the same? First off, I say to you, that was unnecessarily mean. And second of all, no, it cannot. The gameplay here is about as basic and simple as you can get and still rightfully call your game an RPG. You start off each mission in the hub world, the central tower, where you can basically shop and do whatever you want. When you're ready, you just ask to be sent to the next mission, and you get sent to a stage. And yes, this game has stages. Instead of, say, being transported onto a world map and having to run from town to town or anything like that, you have to go to an extraordinarily linear stage which looks ugly as sin and is basically just a bunch of metal corridors with one or two boiling lava pits here and there. And then you run around and try to get through the stage as quick as possible, blasting anything that gets in your way. Or you would if anything did get in your way, because it's a random battle system. And once you're in a random battle, it plays out pretty much like anything else. You use your basic attack and your sub-weapons, you shoot stuff, and then you move on. The one thing about this game that I do like about the battle system is that it has something called action triggers, which are basically special attacks unique to each character. X gets his charge shot, Zero gets a special doppelganger technique, and so on and so forth. The battle system in this game is just so basic, and the enemies are actually so easy, that not once during my entire playthrough, during my entire first playthrough, did I ever really need to change up my strategies while I was playing. The only time I really needed some sort of forethought to what I was doing was when I was fighting the bosses, and admittedly, they're pretty easy too, especially after you figure out what they're weak against, which is really easy in this game, because the game decides to handicap itself even further by giving you basically a restart button. If all of your characters die off before the end of a battle, you're basically given the option to retry the battle right from the very beginning. Exactly as you entered it, no changes whatsoever. Basically meaning that the words game over have no meaning in this game. Admittedly, the enemies did get harder to kill as the game went on, but they never really upped the challenge factor. Instead, the battle just got longer and more tedious instead of more tension-filled. Oh, but there is a reason why they make these fights as slow and plodding as possible. It's because without these fights, the actual stages themselves would be extraordinarily short, Embarrassingly so, especially when you consider how linear they are. Every stage is extraordinarily linear with very little breaks in one way or the other, kind of like you were playing Final Fantasy XIII on the PlayStation 2, but even worse than that is the fact that it feels the need to pad itself out. If it didn't have this padding, the game would be much shorter and would actually make a pretty good 3D Mega Man game if they had designed it that way. Anyway, the battles here happen much more often than they should, to the point where it actually gets hilarious later on. You'll be taking a few steps and all of a sudden have a random encounter, making your pace in these very short stages exceedingly and agonizingly slow. The only time when there's a break from the random encounter is when they're making you do some inane task that just slows you down even more. For example, in this area right here, I'm forced to run around these different kinds of mazes, and am forced to play a game of red light, green light with the enemies here. If I try to move while the screen is red, or if one of the robots passes over me, I'm thrust into a random battle, which I cannot escape from. The entire thing just makes the whole stage seem much more tedious than it should be, and it doesn't add to the fun factor. It makes me want to play something else, something faster, something good. The most innovative thing that this thing does in terms of its battle gameplay is the fact that you have the ability to equip sub-weapons, but trust me, that's not really very innovative because it doesn't make the battles go any faster, and it does not really help you enjoy the game anymore. This is starting to hurt. Okay, we're almost through this. I'm just going to cover the graphics and the sound in the same breath because, trust me, neither of which is up to the standards of a Mega Man game. I will say this about the game. The music in the game is okay, but therein lies the big problem. It is okay, it is average, and it is pretty unremarkable. But when I am thinking of Mega Man, and in particular his music, average should not be a word that enters my mind. More easy to forgive is the fact that the voice acting in this game is just average as well, but that's to be expected. I mean, Mega Man, since it's not really known for its epic storylines, I guess average voice acting is okay. There's nothing that's overly annoying here.
But you'll never reach our leader. You'll perish in this factory first.
I'll ask again. Whose side are you on?
Okay, Epsilon. My answer is...
The graphics are much in the same boat as the music and sound in this game. They aren't bad, but they're extraordinarily average and pretty uninspired, and once again, that is not something I should have to say when I'm thinking of a Mega Man game. As I've already pointed out, there are no themed stages in this game. It's all pretty much just a bunch of factories, metal walls, metal platforms, metal everything, and quite honestly, all the stages can pretty easily blend together. The only real difference is the color of the walls, for God's sake. And even worse than that, it does not reflect the boss at all. In terms of the character designs, I will give them a little bit of credit here. The character designs here are actually pretty good, if a bit ridiculous, but hey, this is Mega Man, what do I know? But it's only when they're standing still. The movements of the character models seems extraordinarily, stiff, for lack of a better term. And if you watch their mouths closely, the voice acting and the lip syncing is really, really off.
An old comrade, is it?
So, with all that in mind, I will endanger my life from every single Mega Man fan out there and say that this game is terrible. When I first heard that Mega Man had an RPG, I was pretty excited, and I thought that the idea had a lot of promise. They could make something wholly unique and new that did something that no other Mega Man game had done before it. But the execution here leaves something that is best described as extremely disappointing. They did not take advantage at all of the fact that this was an RPG with Mega Man in it. While they introduced some original elements, somewhere I'm sure, the whole idea behind the game is just that it's trying to appeal too hard to both fans of Mega Man and fans of RPGs, but it pleases neither because key elements that would make it unique to both sides are missing. If you had made this into a full-fledged, just ordinary Mega Man game, perhaps with some new characters thrown in, but with side-scrolling shooters, I guarantee it would have been much better. Heck, if you had changed the characters around and billed this as a generic sci-fi RPG, I probably would give it a bit less flack. It would still be a terrible game, but at least it would not have the moniker of one of the most famous gaming icons in history attached to it. I really did want to like this game. I want you to understand that. Like I said, it has merit. The idea does sound intriguing, but the fact of the matter is, this is just not a good game, and I cannot consciously recommend it to anybody, Mega Man fan or otherwise. With all that being said, I will say that as bad as this game is, I want them to try this again. Like I said, the idea does have merit, and most other franchises have done some surprisingly good genre jumps. Once again, Mario and Sonic have both experimented very successfully in other fields. But this is a prime example of a failed genre jump, and it is also a prime example why blasters are not better than swords. Right. I'll see you all next time, and maybe I can find something that doesn't suck. This'll do.